Welcome to the first day of October. October. Hope it brings rain where it's needed and relief to some who have had too much. It's quite a mixed weather pattern everywhere. Webster Tarpley is with us this first hour tonight, the first Wednesday of each month. Webster is as busy as ever. We have a lot of topics to touch upon tonight. Welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Thank you, Jeff. How are you?
I'm here. Thank you. Good. A lot of news about Ebola here. We'll be talking about that in hours 2 and 3 tonight with Dr. Henry Nyman. It's obviously,
and we could subsume that under questions of economic program, but I think it would be better to approach it from the other point of view. Because Jeff, this is actually the election program from my point of view on your show, right? I think that next time around it'll be the day after the election, right? So this is now October, and we're going to have an election. So I want to give people an idea what they should have in mind, and if they want to become active, I want them to have a good strategy to try to change things. Okay?
Good. Change.
Can I?
Real change.
Let me just start off now. Or save civilization. That's another way to put it, because it's not just do you want change or don't you, right? You better save civilization.
Yeah.
Now, here's the idea. There are two pieces of evidence that you have to bear in mind, but even before that, some considerations of method. I start from the idea that we need to perpetuate divided government. We do not want to put all power into the hands of either party, and especially not the Republicans. If the Republicans take all power, 2 houses and the presidency, then they will proceed to institute what would amount to a kind of fascist dictatorship for the 21st century. It would be a permanent austerity dictatorship using their control of the Supreme Court, since they have that too. Democrats don't. With the Supreme Court, they could proceed to destroy all labor unions and severely limit the right to vote, the franchise.
Yeah, well, couldn't Barkey make a couple of appointments to the court in his last 2 years?
It's
a
possible,
possibility.
But we have to go based on, and what we have to deal with is actually much more urgent than that. So anyway, you obviously don't want to have the Republicans in control of House, Senate, and Supreme Court against one weak executive for the next 2 years. Obama obviously being incapable of fighting under most circumstances so far. We don't want to court such a situation. So therefore, we want to make sure that the Senate remains not in the hands of the Republicans. And on why in particular that is so from a domestic point of view, we have this very dramatic tape from Mitch McConnell, which was a meeting where he was presenting his devotion to the infamous David Koch, the reactionary billionaire, the guy who thinks that Kansas is his dukedom. So David Koch was sitting there, and some people asked Mitch McConnell of the Republicans, what would you do if you ever got the control of the Senate? And he said, well, if you have the House and 51 votes in the Senate, you can do virtually anything, because you can get all manner of fascist genocide passed in the House, and then you work on that in a conference committee, and when that budget reconciliation comes back to the Senate, they only need 51 votes. So even if the Republicans did not have a filibuster-proof majority, they would be able to do whatever they wanted. So how would you like a country with no food stamps, no minimum wage, no Head Start, no WIC, no nothing? All of that is absolutely within reach, given the Austrian school creed of these lunatics. Okay, so this is worth avoiding. And then we have the other problem, which is the foreign policy side of it. Right. A couple of examples, right? The most recent, the principal foreign policy advisor to Romney in 2012 was a guy called Robert Kagan. And Robert Kagan was on CBS Face the Nation 10 days ago, that Sunday, saying that if he had been in power, in other words, if Romney had been sitting there and the neocon Kagan had been able to make these decisions, the entire Syrian Air Force would have been bombed, all the runways would have been pockmarked, and Assad would have been brought to his knees. And of course, this would mean then that whatever terrorists were on the scene would be the beneficiaries. So these people have learned absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But the most urgent is this question of McCain. If you have two things in your mind when you go to vote, think of that McConnell tape where McConnell says, we will make sure that there's no increase in the minimum wage, or no minimum wage could very well be. And we will not do anything to help people that are crushed by student debt, right? 1.3 trillion of student debt. But on the foreign policy scale, this is where it's even scarier. On my website, tarpley.net, please go there. You'll find it repeated several times. Or on my Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley, there are pictures of Senator John McCain going to Syria. And this is Idlib, Syria, rebel-controlled, terrorist-controlled area. It's April 2013, a year and a half ago almost. Mm-hmm. And he's sitting down with a group of crazies, right, a group of terrorists. Some of them call themselves Free Syrian Army. There is General Idris, Salim Idris was the head of the Free Syrian Army. He is sitting there with Senator McCain, but of course in the meantime, General Idris has fled. He fled to Doha in Qatar, and his number two man fled to Stockholm, Sweden. He got about as far away as he could. But the principal news is that McCain is also sitting down with two people who were kidnappers. They were, widely known to be the kidnappers of a group of Shiite Muslim religious pilgrims who were trying to visit a holy site, and these guys kidnapped them. But the most dramatic is that McCain is sitting there with a guy called Badri, Ibrahim Badri. And when he sat down with him already, Badri was known in the jihad world as Baghdadi. And this Baghdadi was already known to be a member of Al-Qaeda. He had a price on his head from the U.S. of almost $10 million, or up to $10 million U.S. dollars. And he was the head of ISIS. Mm-hmm. He was the head of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, right? Sham, Levant, right? ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, whatever you're going to call it. And this is the same person who has now been elevated to the highest position any human being could have in their belief system, other than the Prophet Muhammad himself.
Indeed.
And that is to be the caliph of the caliphate.
Right.
This caliphate, or worldwide Muslim empire, compulsory for all, is now headed by Caliph Ibrahim. So the same Ibrahim, Badri, Baghdadi, Caliph Ibrahim. That's the guy that dear John McCain
does McCain does he pretend like he doesn't know back then who this guy is? How does he?
Interestingly enough, we have to note that this was brought up on the floor of the Senate and in interviews by Rand Paul, at least that week. I don't know what he's done with it since, but the week before, Rand Paul was in favor of doing nothing, and then he thought it was important to do something, but he also had to differentiate himself from the rest of the somethings. So he brought up this thing about how he wanted to attack McCain. Now, Rand, I think, unwisely grants that McCain didn't know who he was meeting. I think that's ridiculous. I think he knew exactly who he was meeting. He was meeting the top terrorist leaders of Syria, the people that NATO had been backing. Remember,
the so-called
those guys were
moderate
all in Libya.
They're so-called
the moderate terrorists, right?
The moderate terrorists.
Jihadis.
Like you got good terrorists and bad terrorists,
No, you don't. What you have is you have a bunch of people who have different costumes and different hats.
I'm joking.
And when they meet the Saudis, they have one costume. When they meet the Chechens, they have a rather more radical one.
Is a terrorist, of course.
And then when they meet the U.S. or the European Union, they have to be respectable. So that's what they do. They put on their Free Syrian Army suit, but then when they present themselves to the world at large, it's the caliphate. So
how much did Obama just give to the How much did he? Obama just gave a bunch of money to the moderate terrorists to train them.
Wait. Listen, Jeff, I think this is the wrong way to look at it.
Did he not just give some money to them?
No, the Congress voted it, and the money has not been given because the law is written with these provisos in it that you have to prove various degrees of purity And the word from the people carrying out the stuff is that they're not sure they can find anybody of these terrorists in Syria who can look at it that way.
It's the whole thing is like Keystone Cops to me.
Obama. I think you got to.
No. Well, we
got to take.
You and I started. Remember, you and I started out many years ago.
But the world has changed. Obama has been outdistanced in evil. Obama is left in the dust. Look, they don't even tell Obama when somebody tries to kill him. They don't tell him anything. He's a puppet.
That's a very funny line, too. That's very funny. Yes.
They don't even tell him when there's an assassination attempt. They don't even wake him up.
Well, they had somebody in an elevator with him with a gun. Yeah.
Sleepwalking through history. But I'd like to get to that, too.
That's great.
Let me just proceed my own way.
Yeah. So
the idea is the genocidal austerity talked about by McCain and by McConnell. And then on the foreign policy side, the leader of the Republican Party overall is probably McCain. He's the last still active presidential candidate. At least it still appears so. And then he's got his amigo there, Lindsey Graham. And they're calling for a wider war in Syria. They're calling for a wider war in Ukraine. They may be calling for warlike measures on Hong Kong. They may say, send the 101st Airborne Division to Hong Kong. These people are lunatics. They're absolutely nuts. And compared to them, Obama is a day at the beach, okay? So whatever Obama was, he's been ground down. He's essentially on the defensive. I would not regard Obama by any stretch of the imagination as the principal threat. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, fine. But this is a different world now. So I would say to people, it's important to make sure that those fascist Republicans don't get control of the Senate. And I challenge people, think about it. Think about what I'm telling you.
Well, we should look at the House briefly. They have it now, but they're really looking to build what would be, I guess, an historic majority in the House. Something like we haven't seen in 60, 70 years.
No, I don't think they have any hope of that. You got to remember their
they have hope
right now is
but is there any realistic
20
hope?
to 25 seats right now.
Yeah.
This is paper thin by historical standards. For most of the time between 1948 and 1994, the Democratic majority was much greater. Right? It was 100 or more. Right? This is nothing historical.
Well, they're looking. They call it a drive to 245. They want 245 seats, which is a net gain of 11.
Yeah, well, that's fine, and that would be significant. But that's not as lopsided as it has been the other way. So I would say you got to remember the Republican Party is a dying social formation. It is moribund, and the only thing that keeps it going now is the media support, which had been all in favor of Obama, has now flipped. And this is an important principle. The U.S. ruling class of Wall Street parasitical oligarchs controls the presidency in the first term by the president's need to get money to get a second term. But then when you get into the second term, that is when the scandals begin. And the scandals, the so-called jinx, the scandals are the means used by the oligarchs to control the president in the second term. And that's what's happening to Obama. He's going through the ringer. But the big plus that Obama offers is that he is less of a warmonger than McCain or Graham or Petraeus or Keane or any number of other compared to the neocons, right?
Certainly
the neocons are foaming at the mouth against Obama. That anybody can see that. Robert Kagan, William Kristol, Frederick Kagan, they're all foaming at the mouth, right?
Even the Pentagon brass are very upset.
They're very upset because they are warmongers. They're incurable, incorrigible warmongers. And Obama says, no, that's bad for Obama. We'll take Obama under these circumstances. Or better yet, we'll take divided government, right? Because that's the ultimate choice. So let me get further into this.
Sure.
I would suggest as a slogan for these elections, something that I've been putting out now for the past 10 days or so. It is hashtag, right? Or, as some people would say, sharp mark, right? Diesis. Anyway, hashtag arrest McCain for the number 4 ISIS. arrest McCain for ISIS, because here we have somebody who has cavorted, consorted, fraternized with the worst terror. I mean, the caliph, who is ordering people's heads chopped off, is on a first-name basis with McCain.
That's
He's met
right.
him.
Yeah.
And he talks about it. He says to Kerry in the hearings, he says, John, you don't know them the way I know them. I know so many of them, John. They'll never do what you want, right? They'll never attack ISIS and forget about Assad, right? And so McCain appears as the lawyer, practically as the representative. He's the ambassador from ISIS, right? He could, I wonder, can you be the senator from Arizona and at the same time the ambassador from the Islamic Caliphate of ISIS, bringing the news of the latest beheading? This is an unbelievable scandal.
Yeah, it is.
Obama has nothing to compare to this. I'm sorry, there's nothing.
Well, he's got
McCain's
got the press on his watching his flank, though.
They've always loved him.
Yeah.
They've always loved him.
Yeah,
and they are warmongers.
I mean,
okay?
McCain going to see the al-Baghdadi, whatever he was called back then. It reminds me of Dennis Rodman going to see Kim Jong-un, but far more pathological.
But this is much more action-oriented, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Is not some vain, ego trip.
But I mean, here, McCain should even pretend that he's not sitting amongst cold-blooded killers is sickening in itself. Just sickening.
Yeah. And here's what I would say to Rand Paul. Okay, little Rand, you want to be taken seriously. Here's what you should do. When you go to the Senate, you sit down in the Republican caucus, and across the room there is McCain with Lindsey Graham. And therefore, what I recommend is there are two remedies that the Senate has for dealing with a case like McCain. And that is, the first one is censure. Right? If the majority of the Senate votes, I think it's a majority, this depends on their rules, they can censure a sitting senator, right? That is what was done with Senator Joe McCarthy, right, of Wisconsin, the red baiter. He was officially censured by the Senate in the mid-'50s. Then there's a more extreme remedy, which is expulsion from the Senate. And I happen to know a friend, the senator that I knew best was Harrison Williams, Democrat of New Jersey, a strong pro-labor Democrat who was Watergated through Abscam, right? Abscam, Brylab, Pendorf, these things back during the first term of Reagan. And he was forced, he was on the floor of the Senate in the course of a roll call vote, and it became obvious that he was going to be expelled, so he resigned. But that could be done with McCain. Look, compare, whatever the maximum, even assuming that what the late Harrison Williams was accused of. Suppose that's all true. Fine, it wasn't, but let's just assume for argument. Compare that to McCain, right? How many deaths? How many prisoners of war have been machine gunned? How many people have been decapitated? Right? All this stuff, and these are the people that McCain wants to help. Now, with Obama, you have to understand, since we're both students of Obama for all these many years, he takes evasive action. You can see what he's trying to do. Do the minimum to get by without committing political suicide.
Correct.
Because,
That's
of course, what the neocons want is political suicide, right? Yeah. But they don't understand this, right? The neocons don't have political gifts, right? They really don't have any politicians. They pick up politicians like, Bush the Younger or somebody. But the people who are really neocons, they have absolutely no idea because they're incurable warmongers. There's nothing you can do. But Obama always says, this would be bad for me, so I'd rather not do it. So in this case, $500 million to train vetted moderate terrorists, if you can find them, if you can find any. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many, but I would also say take the same week we had the president of Ukraine, right, Poroshenko, or Pornoshenko as I call him.
Poroshenko. Whatever.
I think porno. His policies are obscene. But Poroshenko came over here with the idea that he was going to get a massive load of heavy artillery, heavy tanks, jet fighters,
he went home
helicopters,
with empty
missiles.
pockets.
He got nothing.
No.
And I think that's the real Obama, right? Is, give him the show, right? Let him address the joint session of Congress. It's an obscenity, if you want, but in today's world, it's much better to give him the address.
Well, it seems
but don't give him all that.
It seems that Obama is just dodging left hooks, or right hooks, I should say.
I think so, and let's look at the deeper level, right? Since I've already given away my idea, right? They don't tell the poor guy when there's been an assassination attempt against him or his family, his daughter, his wife, his mother-in-law, whatever it is, right? The community. They don't tell him. How can anybody think that Obama is running anything when he can't even run his own household cavalry, right? He can't run his own household, security operation.
Point well taken.
This is the big thing about the Secret Service, which I would want to stress. What you have to understand about the Secret Service is this is not a matter of incompetence or technical bungling or anything of the sort. The idea with the Secret Service is within it, there are rogue networks, right? And then the people can go back to the 9/11 context or the Kennedy assassination context or the Iran-Contra context. If you know enough, you can go back to the Franklin D. Roosevelt context. But the idea is simply that there's a private network that wants to be able to threaten the president, and they want to be able to kill the president. And in order to be able to threaten and possibly kill the president, if it comes to that, and we've seen it, right? There's no use, being afraid to talk about these
play
things.
Games, tell it straight.
They have to have a totally chaotic Secret Service. Now, what we're hearing on the television is that the Secret Service used to be prestigious and infallible. This is ridiculous. When was that?
When was that? I couldn't remember.
If you look at the circumstances, the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt at Warm Springs, Georgia, April 1945, the Secret Service allowed the president's mistress, right, Lucy Rutherford.
She was in there with him.
She was in there, but more important than her was the Russian woman painter Elizabeth Shumatov and her Russian male photographer assistant, who had come in there with packages of stuff, including a paint box, which was a wonderful medium for chemicals, poisons. That's what it came to. These people were allowed to exit the scene, and they, according to most accounts that I've seen, and I've seen most of them, were never interviewed.
No, they left.
Never interviewed.
They just left. Yeah. I know.
We can look at the Kennedy, right? People, I hope everybody has seen that very interesting film where you see the Kennedy limousine and there's a Secret Service man standing on each corner of the car, right? There's two on the back bumper and two on the front, the running board on the side. And a Secret Service supervisor, this is minutes before
he waves
the death
them off.
of Kennedy.
Yeah.
He tells them to get off. And one of them protests, and the supervisor insists, and then the poor guy who has to get off shrugs his shoulders and then has to walk away.
Well, the one guy put his hands, held his hands upward, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It was an amazing picture. Tell us the story.
That's typical of the Secret Service.
Yeah. Hold on, Webster. Will you please? We have to take a break here. We'll be right back just a couple of minutes with Webster. Hang on. Okay, welcome back. One of the great things about spending time with Webster is pronunciation of words correctly. Moribund. You don't hear that very often. And caliphate and caliph. It's not caliph, it's caliphate. You don't hear it pronounced properly. Okay, so much for that. The vaunted, infallible, impregnable Secret Service.
Yes, which of course is a discredited agency, right?
Bunch of drunks and porn hounds is what they are.
Well, yes.
Druggies.
And that's there are two things going on, really. One is we go back and look at, poor Gerald Ford. He happened to have Nelson Rockefeller as vice president. Nelson wanted to be president, so therefore we get Sarah Jane Moore and Lynette Squeaky Fromm.
Yeah.
Poor Reagan, the intelligence community was not loyal to Reagan, but to Bush the elder.
Yeah.
So therefore we see Hinckley appear, and every one of these is studded with lapses, blunders, mistakes, failures, shortfalls, all this other stuff. We could go on, for a long time about this, right? But those Ford and Reagan are interesting because the CIA candidate was in both cases the vice president, and we get these assassination attempts that we know of.
Yeah.
And then the other side, what you say about the Cartagena orgy, the supervisor here in the Hay Adams Hotel who went back to get the bullet that he left in this woman's room.
It's just, Keystone Cops.
But now it's actually worse because then we have this poor black woman, Miriam Carey. It's just about a year ago. This is worth remembering, right?
Yeah, well, I want to know what that was about, Webster. I don't know. There's something going on there, something real strange.
Here's what you have to do. Here's the method, right? One thing is to delve into the specifics of the people, and therefore you usually find people who are mentally disturbed, and therefore they can be manipulated by all kinds of people. In some cases, the caregivers have to be the suspects. But here's what I would rather do. Take the time frame, and you'll see what the issue is. And the issue generally turns out to be something with war and peace, right? Something that the rogue network, and we're talking rogue network, invisible government, parallel government, secret government, deep state, whatever you want to call it. And we know this exists, right? And they have not been touched since 9/11, right? Nobody has laid a glove on them, I would say. The hostility of the rogue network against Obama appeared at the end of 2009 with Mutalab, the underwear bomber in the Christmas Day skies over Detroit. Remember him?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll remember a couple of days afterwards on MSNBC, we had the report. You can find this all on Tarpley.net. On MSNBC, that the Obama White House had concluded that letting Mutalab on that plane to attempt to blow it up was deliberate. It had been deliberate on the part of U.S. intelligence community. We later found that the State Department wanted to pull his visa, but another agency said no, he keeps his visa because we're going to follow him to the really big fish. And then, of course, you see what happens. Now, I think that was sort of generally softening up Obama for war and for to essentially continue the Bush era wars. But let's just look at it. Suppose we say right now, right? Obama, as we've heard now, we had he was in the elevator with the pistol-toting, 3 times convicted felon in Atlanta on the 16th of September. Well, what's the issue? What's the issue on the 16th of September? What's the issue now on the 20th of September? By the way, on the 20th of September, there were 2 incidents, not one. The second one has largely disappeared from the narrative. The first one is the guy who jumps over the fence, runs into the front door, runs to the East Room, runs to the Green Room, and all the while he's got 3.5-inch knife. All right, that's bad enough. But there's another one, which is a car that breaks into the Pennsylvania Avenue secured area and tries to tail other vehicles into the White House, and the guy in that car refuses then to leave, right? Because those are very dangerous because they could be car bombs. I mean, they can be, a couple of 100 yards closer can make all the difference with such a car bomb. So, I mean, what would you say the issue is right now? Well, turn on the TV. What are you going to find? You're going to find a neocon saying, Obama's feckless, Obama's not enough of a warmonger, we need a real warmonger.
Yeah, he's got our hands tied.
We've got a bomb Iran. We got to get tough with Putin. And I'm sure you're going to start hearing, we got to show those Chinese they can't push around our wonderful heroes of democracy, right?
Oh, yeah, that's coming next.
And they're going to tell the Chinese, stop meddling over this godforsaken piece of rock, right? Whatever this Senkaku Island is or whatever it is, right? I didn't mean to take sides with the way I referred to it. Right? I'm strictly neutral between China and
May I just rewind real quick?
Let me just continue.
Right.
Let me just, if you can just hold on to it.
The
point of this is that there's a great question of war and peace going on right now, right? War and peace hangs in the balance, and that's when they appear. Now let's go back just a little bit,
right.
And this is the one that we've just learned about, right? The 7 bullets fired into the back porch of the White House, right? The Truman balcony. 7 bullets fired from Constitution Avenue and the Ellipse on 11/11/11. Oh my God. November 11th, 2011, right? A date, it's obviously redolent with free Masonic symbolism. Oh my Lord. And when the Washington Post had to put up the article, they posted it at 11/11. I don't know, was that ironic? Are they making jokes, right? This woman, Leone, right? You see her on TV now, right? She's the one who did the research. All right. So on the night of 11/11/11, 7 bullets on 11/11/11. I don't know. There must be something happening with that. But what was the issue?
They do like numbers. We know that.
What was they do? They really they are obsessed with that stuff. What was the issue on November 11th, 2011? Well, I can see two things. The first is Obama had made his definitive speech saying, "We are exiting Iraq. End game, finished, over, no more, out." That speech had been made on the 21st of October, 2011. So 3 weeks before the 7 bullets. Okay.
Got it.
That's the kind of thing that gets those guys going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that had just happened was in October, also, Gaddafi of Libya had been killed. And what was beginning to happen, and you can see this, I went and found some clippings. It was known. We knew it. I knew it. It was happening in October, November of 2011. It was the airlift was beginning. An airlift and a sea lift to take the jihadis, the crazies, that had just destroyed Libya, ship them to Turkey.
Moving them Turkey, up in a position to go into Syria. Yeah.
Into Syria. And this operation... Mm-hmm. the Benghazi business is rooted in that. That is what Ambassador Stevens, I'm afraid, was doing. That is why his last meeting on earth was with the Turkish consul in Benghazi, Libya. Otherwise, what sense does that really make?
All right.
So here
we have to take our last...
Two big war issues hang in the balance.
Yeah.
And the Rogue Network speaks up. And they say, guess what? We're here. And we want war, and you better not de-escalate. You better escalate, or we can get you any time of day, anywhere we want.
Well, that's what we have to take a break. But 11/11/11. In case you folks don't know it, and you say correctly, this story has just come back in the media, but it was gone. A man was able to park his car on a street near the White House and fired off 7 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle, and hit the White House. He got away. He just drove away. So it's a very interesting situation that Webster is constructing for us.
And may I just add one other facet, or do we have to wait?
Let's wait. Let's get it done. We'll come right back. Very interesting.
It's Congressman Lamborn.
Okay. All right. We'll be right back. Okay. And that White House shooting in 2011 is very interesting. I'm very happy that this woman has brought this material forward. Just very quickly here. President Obama and his wife were out of town on that evening, by the way, November 11th, 2011, but their younger daughter, Sasha, and Michelle, Obama's mother, were inside. Older daughter, Malia, was expected back at any moment. Secret Service officers initially rushed to respond. One, stationed directly under the second-floor terrace where the bullet struck, drew her .357 and prepared to crack open an emergency gun box. Snipers on the roof, standing just 20 feet from where one of the bullets struck, scanned the south lawn through their rifle scopes for signs of an attack. With little camera surveillance on the White House perimeter, it was up to the Secret Service officers on duty to figure out what was going on. Then came an order that surprised some of them, at least. The order, quote, "No shots have been fired. Stand down." That from a supervisor. He said it was a backfire from a nearby construction vehicle. All right, go ahead.
No, I say if you interrogate that guy, that supervisor who said, nothing to see here, stand down, keep moving, no gunshots, you pull on that, you'll get to the Rogue Network.
Agreed.
You'll get to see what invisible government looks like.
Wonder if he's still alive.
A little bit like, remember the guy who was commanding the Northeast Air Defense sector, and he said, I can't have my planes take off because then they'd all run out of gas at the same time.
Unbelievable.
I mean, this is one of those cases.
Yeah.
And remember, the issue then November 11th, 2011, is, are you going to end the Iraq war? And Obama's saying yes. And are you going to start the Syrian war? And I don't know what Obama was saying, but it may just be a reinforcer saying, you haven't interfered with us yet, but, don't even dream of doing it, right? So,
yeah.
And you can go back, for example, a year ago, right? This poor lady who was killed, right? Shot with her baby daughter sitting in the back seat.
Right.
Obviously deranged, right? Unarmed, right? Forgotten now. Miriam Carey. So that issue was, of course, that was about the time when the city of Qusair, the rebel stronghold of Qusair, Syria, had fallen, and the rebels were beginning to lose. And the question was, would the U.S. or somebody, try to bail them out? So that, in a sense, was the prelude. It was coming right after the non-bombing of Syria, right after the fake Ghouta chemical weapons case, right? So this was sort of a post hoc expression of unhappiness from the rogue network, right? And the fact that the woman is black and she gets massacred, unlike these other guys who, do the shooting or run up the lawn.
Yeah.
They get different treatment. There's something about being black, right? It's not unusual, but maybe in this case that would have impressed Obama particularly, right? That there was a very definite double standard. So anyway, you get the idea. Now, this also comes in the framework of an attempt to incite insubordination and mutiny in the armed forces. And I'm glad some of this got onto MSNBC, I think, last night. And this is a congressman from Colorado by the name of Lamborn. And Congressman Lamborn, right-wing Republican, had given a speech to a group of 40 or 50 right-wing extremists in Colorado. And he said to them, some of us, right? So an organized force, and I guess it means the House Republican caucus or parts of it, right? Maybe it's the House Republican study group. I don't know if he's a member. But some part of the House Republicans are approaching generals and admirals and other officers and saying, do you agree with Obama's no boots on the ground, right? Are you demanding boots on the ground, right? Do you want a wider war? Are you demanding escalation? And Obama's not giving it to you. Well, if any of that applies to you, you should resign. We should have mass resignations from the armed forces, and they should make statements, right? They should, as the guy said, go out in a blaze of glory. Now, that could also be interpreted in a number of ways. But basically, at least on the surface meaning is you've got to resign from the armed forces. So, first of all, this is obviously quite significant, right? From the Republican point of view, the United States is at war, right? We have the war on terror. And in the middle of the war on terror, the Republicans say, we want to promote mass resignations and a de facto mutiny to cripple the U.S. armed forces in the midst of a war against terrorists, right? Mm-hmm. That's how they would see it. And there is something to that vision. I mean, there is something like that going on, but not the way they would see it. Mm-hmm. So what are we to do with an opposition party that thinks that they can get away with fomenting mutiny, desertion, maybe insubordination? They're trying to destroy the morale of the armed forces for partisan gain. This is quite extreme. Now, I think the guy has claimed that, he was taken out of context, but he wasn't. He was precisely doing this. I'll give you another interesting example. William Crystal, on one of the Sunday shows this past week, mm-hmm. You have to remember, on Sunday evening, Obama appeared on 60 Minutes on CBS, and he said, the U.S. intelligence community underestimated the danger of ISIS. And they all start screaming, right? All the CIA clowns, all the DIA clowns, all the State Department clowns. They say, how dare you? How dare you? We told you everything. You're a bungler, not us. Well, I'm afraid, no, I think he's quite right. Right? This is an understatement because it's not that they understated it; it's that they created it. Without the CIA, there's no ISIS.
No question.
Let's get serious. There wouldn't be the Syrian rebels. How did the Syrian rebels get across the Mediterranean from Libya to Turkey and then into Syria with the CIA, passport or whatever they had? So it's really an outrageous situation. So William Crystal gets on CBS, and they say, well, what do you think? And he said, oh, this is outrageous. It's funny because remember, the traditional neocon stance is that the CIA is worthless, right? Mm-hmm. That was what, Wolfowitz and Cheney and all these people thought. But now the CIA is untouchable for them, and they're putting this on with William Crystal, and he actually says then, he says to the CIA, he says, let me say something to the CIA people listening in. He says, dear CIA, or, people in the CIA should know that if you don't like what Obama is saying about you, you can leak. And then he gives the phone number of his magazine, the Weekly Standard, 202, blah, 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 right, whatever the phone number is. And he says, you should call me and you should leak. These people, remember, they were so freaked out that there had been leaks, from the Obama White House, right? That Obama was leaking when he wanted to.
Yeah.
And now he gets on national television and says, you should call and essentially give me secret information to which I have no clearance or right. So it's an atmosphere of putsch. And let me just quickly sum up the whole thing. What's the putsch faction? Well, think of 7 Days in May, right? Think of 7 Days in May. You have different kinds of military officers. You have a couple of senators. You have these kinds of things.
You really do smell this in the wind, huh? Interesting.
This has been around. I mean, they're getting closer and closer, and I wouldn't rule out anything. And I would also have to say the political culture of the United States is one of the most imbecilic in the world. Because you
absolutely.
See these people, they go on at length, the culture of the Secret Service is no good. Oh, they're sloppy. They're demoralized. My God, there's a private rogue network in there that they promote an atmosphere of chaos and incompetence because that's a great camouflage. But there's a rogue network that wants to be able to issue these threats and, if necessary, to carry them out. Now, again, who? Well, we've heard McCain, arrest McCain for ISIS. With a hashtag in front. Lindsey Graham was on TV the other week, and he said, if Obama doesn't get this right, ISIS is going to come over here and kill every one of us. They're going to exterminate the entire population of the United States. I remember
that quote.
With 25,000 crazies, right? 25,000 psychotic patsies, because it turns out a lot of them are schizophrenic. Then there's a second rank. I would say John Forbes Kerry, Skull and Bones, Secretary of State, Samantha Power, Kerry, the Skull and Bones faction, Samantha, of course, the humanitarian bomber faction. Now, if we go back to April in the Wall Street Journal, we'll find that they had already brought in General David Petraeus and General Jack Keane, 4-star generals both, to help start the war in Syria the way it really needed to be started. Right? This was April of this year. So they brought in Petraeus and Keane, and of course Petraeus is the key to all neocons. Right? He's the great hope of the neocons is that he would come in as a man on horseback, one way or the other. And General Jack Keane, now this is important too, because he works for the Institute for the Study of War, which is run by Kim Kagan. And Kim Kagan and these people, that's the Kagan clan. So that was Donald Kagan of the Brookings Institution was the number one foreign policy guy for Romney. And then we also have this other Kagan, Frederick Kagan, designed the surge for Petraeus and Crocker back in 2007, and he's now at the American Enterprise Institute. So if you look at it, I think that's a pretty good estimate of who's involved in fomenting this fragmenting of the U.S. Armed Forces.
That's a very interesting observation. Very well thought out.
Have a wider war and escalation everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I would say the slogan for this next month, #Arrest McCain for ISIS.
Well,
I think it's a very complicated analysis, but that subsumes it.
No, you did a great job in that hour. Terrific. You put your finger on the undercurrents that are there, clearly, and I agree with you, and I've said it for many years. Everything's on the table, and I wouldn't rule anything out at this point. I think you're right.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, Webster. Great to talk to you, as always.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.